welcome to Audio Electronics. We're going to do the review for quiz number 1. By this time, you probably know how these things go, so I'm just going to jump right in. Number 1, about decibels. Decibel is a unit used to measure the intensity of a sound in a logarithmic expression. So we've talked about this a lot, right? That sound is not linear. We hear it logarithmically, so decibel is a much better way of talking about it for us. Now, there are several different reference points and scales that we can use. dBm is the next one we're going to talk about. 1 milliwatt going through a system, that is equal to 0 dBm. Okay, as opposed to dBu. We'll use dBu for the electronics. 0.75 volts, that's going to show up as 0 dBu. All right, RMS is how we're going to describe the energy of a complex waveform or sine wave, any sound that we are that we're recording or we're making or we're listening to, right? It's going to be useful to us to know the amount of energy that that's putting out. Now, if you think about most waveforms, right, they're going to have about the same amount positive as negative, push and pull. So the way we deal with that is we take kind of an average. And so that's the RMS. Root mean squares, what those letters correspond to. RMS describes the energy of the complex waveform. Power level increases as the volume increases. This is kind of common sense, maybe. We shouldn't take it for granted, though, right? Power level is directly proportional to the volume increase. So one goes up, the other goes up. Level itself, if we're just talking about level, then that's the magnitude of a quality in relation to some arbitrary reference value, right? So just the past few questions that we've been talking about, we've been jumping back and forth between these different references. dBm, dBu, dBV we haven't even talked about yet, but those are all different scales, and so just the word level can be used for all of those. Transmission gain is the type that we're talking about. If we're just saying gain as opposed to level, transmission gain is the type that we're talking about, if not specified otherwise. And 1 kilohertz, 1K, is identical to the sound pressure level in dB. So we use that as sort of our benchmark. We're always comparing everything against 1K. And so a bunch of the other things that we talked about in class had to do with what was the value at 1K compared to something else. OSHA uses a weighted scale is what OSHA uses. OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, right? They set guidelines for how loud things can be, how loud is too loud. And they use a weighted. So I'm not even going to get into the other weightings because that could confuse some people. Lastly, when you have loudness compensation, we used to have these buttons in my car stereos, I remember, that would say loudness, and you would push that, and the lows and the highs both would get boosted when you pushed the loudness compensation. And that leads into a much bigger discussion that I find kind of interesting, whether you do or not. But as the kangaroo says, at these prices, I'm not surprised.